Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club. This is the masterpiece selection for the month of July. Let me preamble a minute here. We do a lot of interviews. We talk to a lot of people. I like talking to everybody that I like talking to, but I'm actually really kind of genuinely excited tonight for tonight's guest, for someone who's been in this business a really long time and has seen a lot of things and seen the way that the market has changed. Seen it at its best and maybe seen it at its worst. And I could not be more excited on this, the eve of the 30th anniversary of Bone Number One. I am so thrilled to have Jeff Smith with me. He's holding up his original first printing copy of Bone Number One. There you go. August 91, is that right?
July.
Oh, July, sorry, right, because it's still June.
That's right.
Corona time, yeah. Yeah, you were done. It was off to the printer by this point, though, right? Huh? It was off to the printer by June of 21, of 91.
Oh yeah, well yeah, yes.
Yeah. 30 years.
30 years, dude. And you were got in business right around that time too.
Yeah, I started in '89, so 89? I was 2 years ahead of you. Yeah.
That's like when did Sandman start? Was that 89 or 80?
Sandman started in '88. So yeah, we opened up when Sandman, I want to say it was Sandman 5 was the first month we opened, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Here's a fun fact for you. When I went into a local comic book store here in Columbus, Ohio, to see Bone on the shelf of a comic book store for the very first time, it was called Comics Connection, and on the shelf that month was Wizard number 1 and Bone number 1. They were the same. They shipped the same time.
And one of them still exists and is relevant, and the other one is not at all relevant in any way, shape, or form.
I am not going to make fun. I'm not going to tease.
No, I'm not. I'm just. It's funny because everybody thought. I mean, Wizard was the Bible for the longest time, and because I. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the the early part of self-publishing and yeah. Well, hold on. But before I do that, let me ask the first question, because I got to ask the first question, and it's always the same first question because it's my favorite question. Why comics? Of all the things you could be doing in your life, what is it about comics that speaks to you, that makes your heart sing, that had to be the thing that you had to do?
You know, I don't know for sure, but I bet it's the same thing that made you want to be a part of comics, or other cartoonists wanted to be part of it. I was obsessed with comics when I was a kid. I mean, I loved them. I grew up in the 60s. I was young in the 60s. But at that time, Peanuts in the newspapers was making its, there was the original specials, the Halloween special, the Christmas special. They were naming moon flights, lunar landers, after Snoopy and Charlie Brown. Like, I think the mission before Apollo 11, Apollo 10, I think, was Charlie Brown and Snoopy. I mean, comics just were really happening in the 60s. Cartoons were happening. The Flintstones were big. Batman was on TV when I was 6 years old. And it blew my mind. I was like, that was one of the most exciting things I ever saw. I mean, the campiness of it completely went over my head at that age. But yeah, in fact, it made me wonder, like, when I grow up, is it possible that superhero is one of the career choices you could pick? Be an architect or a policeman or a Batman.
Or a superhero. Or Batman. So,
I loved it. And of course, that Batman is what actually really led me to find the newsstand and start buying comic books. I think the first one I bought was I probably bought the first day Carl Barks, Donald Duck, and a Batman comic. And I think it was the one. It was a Carmen Infantino cover where there was a clue on the cover, and Batman was being lazy in the Batcave watching the Batman show. You remember that issue?
Yeah. I know the one. Yeah.
I think that was like the first comic book I ever bought.
Wow. Okay.
So, but just to briefly say, yes, I became obsessed with artists, following their styles. I mean, this was the first time they would actually name Jack Kirby I apologize for the dinging in the corner there. I'm getting a lot of messages and I don't know how to stop that. It's a little beyond my pay grade. But all of a sudden they were talking about these artists, Carmen Infantino or Jack Kirby, Don Heck, Neil Adams. A couple of years later, I became obsessed with following the styles of these different artists around, trying to find the comic books. It wasn't like today's comic book stores, which are so amazing that you could just get every issue of every comic. I mean, back then, it was really random what showed up on the news.
Sure.
You might miss 2 or 3 issues in between, and
100%.
you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's interesting that you were following styles that young, because I don't think I started to actually get that human beings did these until I was like 16, right? Like, I mean, I knew that obviously someone must do them, but like I hadn't differentiated yet, even though comic books are all about style in many ways.
I wasn't that young when I started following. Okay. I was probably 9 or 10 though, because it was really Neil Adams. Yeah. Who I started following when he was doing Dead Man, and I didn't really follow Dead Man because the issues just were extremely difficult to come across, even when they were being published.
Yeah.
But Batman, and he was doing Brave and the Bold, and I was like, what is happening? What is this style? I mean, it was Neil Adams and Kirby's Fantastic Four were the two things that like began to make my brain boil a little bit and get excited. And I did follow through. I know Neil was really heavily into, doing work and up until about 72, 73. Yeah. And I was 12 or 13, middle school or something.
Yeah.
Like that. And I was really into that. I was obsessed with it. The other reason I was obsessed with comics, Brian, is that it was kind of it was more for kids. It was kind of a secret language.
Sure.
Back then in the 60s and 70s. And they were talking to, I thought they were talking to us as kids. They probably weren't. They were probably just writing stories to get themselves excited. But I got from Charlie Brown, they're talking about real emotions, embarrassment, humiliation on the playground at school. Yeah. Humiliation at sports. Nobody talked about kids' psychology or the kind of tortures we were going through. Sure. That was only in comics. Sure. And in Mad Magazine, they were telling you, oh, don't listen to commercials. They're trying to make you feel bad about yourself and make you buy this product. That was truth. Yeah. So I was obsessed, and I also felt it was enlightening. And that's why I knew early on. I knew by the time before I was 10, I knew that this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah. No, that is. I love that. I know exactly the thing that you're talking about, because so I don't remember who it was. I think it was Julie Schwartz who had the thing where the readership turns over every 3 years, so you've always gotta aim your comics at like the kid who's coming in. You gotta aim it
them fresh, renew it,
right up their thing, and then Stan, the thing that Stan did is that he figured out that he could talk directly to us, like those soapboxes, like where you would just talk about current contemporary things that are happening in the world and make it.
Stanley and his soapbox was so important to comics. It was important to me as a reader to be talking to the person who was making these comics.
Yep.
I mean, Stan probably shouldn't have taken credit as a writer. He was a brilliant editor.
Right.
He was really, he was key when it came to like choosing talent and he was a great editor and a great promoter. I'm not so sure how much of a writer he really was. But a lot of true. But a lot of that is in hindsight. And did you read the new biography?
I have not. No, I have not. No.
It's It's really good. Got a little bit of a Knives Out feeling to it.
Right.
But that's kind of how I felt about Stan anyway. So
sure. I was just talking to my manager about the FF, and I was like, it's a seminal run. You really need to read it. But, it's kind of dated. Like, like just all the kind of, anti-communist stuff and like just all this like the role models. It's really like,
well,
Jack made it like just it's imagination, exploding imagination,
Yeah. And Sue Storm being the wife who's like not getting enough attention is like so bewitched or something. They were of that time, and for being of that time, they were somewhat forward. They were not somewhat forward. They were definitely heading in a new direction. I love that, and a lot of that, like I said, came from Kirby. So
So okay, so you say
can I just say,
please?
I want to let people know that you and I got into comics around the same time. You were a couple years before me, but we entered comics. We've known each other for a long time. We're talking like 30 years.
Exactly.
And in those early days, I remember seeing you at every freaking show.
Sure.
Well, because a lot of the important shows were like, in San Francisco and San Diego.
Yeah.
There were more than one in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah. Well, we had ProCon, the early ProCon,
The early ProCons,
Yeah.
So, I just want to say that this guy has run a store with such integrity for so many years. It's kind of fun to catch up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and it's what I love. I love comics, and I love talking about them, and I love. If I could give people advice at those shows, I absolutely would. It's weird. I have no interest in going to a show now because they're not like those shows were then. I mean, you could have those moments, right? But they're all about media now, rather than about the actual form,
Well, back then the shows were small. I mean, some of them were. I mean, San Diego, when I first went, was still like 35, 40,000.
Yeah.
Which is, now it's like 150 or more.
Yeah.
40,000 people. Yeah. That's still pretty big. That's a big show.
I'll tell you, the year I decided that San Diego was basically done for me was the year that they made the remake of that Time Machine movie with Guy Ritchie. It wasn't a very good movie. It was pretty obvious it wasn't going to be a very good movie. But they brought the Time Machine.
What Guy Ritchie Time Machine movie?
There was a time exactly. Which Guy Ritchie Time Machine movie? But they brought the Time Machine into like the set, right? Like they brought the set into San Diego Comic-Con, and it was larger than the Marvel or DC booth put together. And that was the moment that I went, "We're done." It's now. This is going to be a media show, and it's not a comic show anymore.
Yeah, I'm on half and half on that. Like, yes, a lot of attention, and certainly the media covering Comic-Con was all about the movie stuff and the people in costume. But as far as like the comic book section, we were that size. We expanded a little bit in the in the 90s, and then everything just blew out around us. But we didn't shrink.
That's true. No, that's very true.
We stayed the same size, and people come in and they're still dressed like She or Thorn or whatever, Vampirella.
Yeah, I could have old man-itis, but I'm not going to. It's all good.
I'm already there, I think.
Yeah. Well, so okay, let's go back to you. So you say you're 10 years old and you had already figured out that you wanted to make comics, which I think is fucking amazing, dude. So what did that look like as a teenager and as a young man going to college or whatever? How did you approach like, I want to do comics?
Well, when I was young, I was like, okay, I love Peanuts. I got introduced to Pogo when I was 9. I think I was like in the 4th grade. And there was a Chuck Jones, Walt Kelly cartoon that wasn't very good, but at 9, I loved it. It was a cartoon. Yeah. And the next day at school, there was a little girl. She's a little girl at that time, my age, named Tammy, that brought in a pogo book from her dad's collection and gave it to me. I don't know if she got his permission. I still have that book.
Oh, wow.
But I held this book, this pogo book, and it was like this thick. I mean, the only thing you have to compare it to today would be like a Calvin Hobbes collection or something, or anything, a bone book. Sorry. But yeah, it was this big, thick book with these like drawings that were really, the construction of the drawings. I didn't think about it as terms of construction, but I could tell that these were like good enough to be in a Disney feature film.
Yeah.
And it was the thickest, fattest comic book I ever saw, and it was the pogo book where something rippled through me, and I said, I must do this. Now, that being said, Brian, I forgot that after a while.
Sure, of course.
I got indoctrinated into high school, and it wasn't, there wasn't much encouragement in art, let alone in comics.
Absolutely.
So, I think by the time I was a senior in high school, I'd already started to lose interest in comics. I collected them when I was up to about the age of like 14, 15.
Yeah.
And I was like thinking, well, what art skills can I use? I thought maybe I could go into animation. Right. And in the 70s, Disney was not in great shape. They were turning out the Black Hole and Aristocats or whatever. But I still thought that's probably where I should go because I love cartoons. I had one art teacher who was, I had like 3 art teachers in high school, and 2 of them hated my guts, or at least it felt like that. They failed me multiple times. But I had one art teacher who kind of got me, and I was talking to him one day, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do for a living. I mean, I guess I'm going to go to apply at Disney. And he said, don't do it, Smith. He says, you won't last a day there. And what he meant was I can't handle somebody telling me this is what you're going to draw today, and this is exactly what it's going to look like. It's exactly what you're going to do. Right. And he was right. And thank God I listened to him. But that meant I was in free fall for a number of years, where I thought I tried to go into illustration. I worked for a couple of newspapers and did ads and paste ups. I just working on crap jobs, doing crap art, but mostly I worked in factories and on loading docks and stuff.
Okay, so you didn't go to college to study art or anything?
I did get a scholarship from my high school. I went to Worthington High School in Ohio near Columbus, and I got a 1-year scholarship to go to the Columbus College of Art and Design, which is it's a good school. It's a nationally known school, and however, at that time, they had 2 programs. You could go into fine art, or you could go into illustration. Right. And illustration, and both of those were, I thought, well, illustration, yeah, that's sort of like comic books, right?
Kind of. Yeah.
And I found the teacher who I thought would understand me the best, but when I was talking to him and I said, yeah, I love to take anatomy because I want to do comics. I just want to learn these skills, how to tell comics. And he turned to me, and I was quite surprised because I really kind of thought I had some kind of simpatico thing going on with this guy. And he just was like, comics are the bastard child of newspapers and art. It's just junk. Get over it. You need to move on right now. You need to choose, boy. You need to choose what you're going to do, and it's not comics. And if you want to do comics, you need to get out. Yeah. And this was like right before Christmas break. I'd just been there this one semester, and I just turned around and I left. Yeah. And that's what about 5 years of working on loading docks after that.
Wow. Wow. And what were you like doodling at that? I mean, what were you doing to keep that muscle going or to keep the interest going?
I got to say, like right around that time, right around my senior year, a couple of things happened that were very interesting to me. One was heavy metal came out.
Yeah.
I think it was summer of '77 in my memory.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And this is the first time I saw Inky Bilal or Mobius,
Exactly.
or Corbin in the American. This is the American version.
Yeah. Yeah.
For younger people, it's not the heavy metal of today, which has got its good points. But this was an English version, an American version of French language anthology of amazing artists who were doing adult fantasy cartoons. And I don't mean adult like rated X, although sometimes.
So there was plenty of rated X.
There was plenty of boobs. But it was for mature minds. It was, and this of course was, the 70s. So there was lots of mind altering help while you're reading this.
Yeah.
And there were two other things that happened that same summer. And I'm sure you'll remember them. One was Star Wars came out.
Right.
Well, no, sorry. Star Wars came out. The other thing was just on a personal level, a buddy of mine was trying to get me to read The Lord of the Rings for like 4 years. And I finally read it. So I read The Lord of the Rings, saw Star Wars in the theaters, and started buying
heavy metal.
Magazine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a trifecta there to blow your mind. Yeah, absolutely.
I was gone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But to answer your question, so I'm going to work, and I worked in I worked in an ice cream factory. I worked in a bookstore on the loading dock, and at home I would draw like what I thought would be these cool heavy metal-esque type like stories. And I had a buddy, Jim Kemmerer, who was like a pal of mine, and he and I did an animation studio later. But he would help me, or we would do it together, and we would like work on these like kind of crazy, weird, I don't know, heavy metal-like stories with the Bone characters. And that's where like the humans came in, like, because back in heavy metal, you always had to have like a babe who was wearing a bikini, an inexplicably useless set of clothing, that kind of thing. I think I even have a drawing somewhere of Phone Bone and a female, and it's in some crazy, there's monsters attacking them and everything, and she has like a guitar slung over her back. I was 18. What do I know?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that just kind of kept the spark alive.
Yeah. So you've been drawing the Bones for like before you were 18 then, is what I'm.
I probably started when I was really, really little, like 5 years old.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And then I was just doing I draw all sorts of cartoons like most people that draw comics do.
Yeah.
In fact, most kids do, whether they stick with it or not. You draw little cartoon dogs or whatever.
Right.
That's what you see on TV, little Bugs Bunnies. And I drew little stories. The Bones really stuck with me, though. I don't really know why, but they just kind of, I melded with them. I enjoy them. And all three of the cousins, Phone Bone, Phony Bone, and Smiley Bone, are in these comics from when I was like 10 years old. They're terrible and they're not very well drawn. But
no, sure.
Their personalities are there. They're pretty intact. So I don't know. I don't know when I was in high school, I just thought the Bones were, that's childish things to put away.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the early 80s now, I graduated from high school in '78, but in the early 80s, I decided, and I'm excited now about heavy metal and the concept of Star Wars. I've seen all 3 Star Wars movies at this point, or I've seen 2 of them anyway. And I'm like, okay, I want to do something, and I want to take these Pogo Snoopy type cartoon characters, the big nose, 3-fingered Bigfoot, traditional American cartoon characters that I was in love with when I was little, and meld them into this crazy Star Wars heavy metal Mobius world. And kind of explore that. And I thought for some reason I thought that's what I want to do. And so sometime in the early 80s, the ideas for Bone began to come together.
Wow. How early, how young were you when you had them named and such?
Probably 5 or 6.
Wow. So really, wow. These are characters.
Well, my dad used to read Mad Magazine to me.
Yeah.
I love Spy versus Spy and Don Martin. Those are my two favorite things.
Yeah.
So Don Martin used to have these. He had a name. Phone Bone was a name in the Don Martin cartoons, but it'd be like it was just like it just was anybody. It just meant this is Phone Bone or Phone Bone's Milk or Phone Bone's Deli or whatever. That was just a generic name he used everywhere. So I had drawn this little character that kind of looked like a telephone receiver, and that kind of led me to Phone Bone, and I named him Phone Bone because I was only 5 or 6, but it stuck with me, and that just became his name. And then when I had to have other characters for him to talk to, they became other Bones. So it was just a kid nothing thing, but I went back to it when I was like 22. Looking for something, and I found something that was interesting to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. I adore that. So how did we get from sort of you having the idea of putting the cartoon characters in their realistic world in the 80s to actually publishing in the 90s? Well,
I met Vijaya, who is now my wife and has been my publishing partner for 30 years now.
And it was all kinds of awesome, by the way. I had pitched to Vijaya to be on camera and talk to us as well.
I tried to talk her into it. She didn't want to do it. But you especially, you were there. You know that we were a team.
Yeah,
so it's not
100%. You guys were a team. Your success. I mean, you're a great cartoonist. Don't get me wrong, but you would not have been as successful without Vijaya. That is clear.
I 100% agree. Yeah. So, but when I met Vijaya and we kind of were getting, starting to get tight. This was in the early 80s. She was going to enroll at Ohio State, and I thought, well, you know what? I'm tired of working on loading docks and in factories, and I'm not a lifer in that world. So I hatched a plan. She was going to go to Ohio State. I'll go to Ohio State also, but I'm going to try to get into the student newspaper, the Ohio State Lantern.
Yeah.
It came out Monday through Friday and had a readership of like 50,000 every single day. I mean, everybody read the Lantern. Everybody, faculty, staff, every student. I mean, you just got one in the morning. That's just what you did. So I did. I had to be a journalism student in order to have my. So that's my major, was journalism.
Okay.
I'm not a journalist, but I mostly took racquetball and fencing. And I didn't graduate, by the way. I went for 4 years and did a comic strip in the daily paper every single weekday for 4 years.
Wow.
I really learned my craft, and I learned who my characters were. And this is where I brought the Bones and threw them out of their little world of Duckburg, which is the kind of comics I'd done when I was a kid.
Sure.
And it's like, oh no, they've been thrown out of Duckburg, and all of a sudden they're in heavy metal, Star Wars, Brothers Grimm, European tales. Right. And so it was just, I didn't really have a big story in mind, but I had it's sort of like fish out of water gags every day.
Yeah.
But over the course of the 4 years, I came up with the rat creatures and the dragon and Thorn and Grandma Ben, and their characters and their personalities, their backstories all kind of came together. Yeah. So after 4 years, I almost had enough credits to be a sophomore. But I didn't care because at that point I knew what the story was I wanted to do, and I had to get to work on that. Right.
And just because I'm curious, what's the experience of having to hit that daily deadline like? Is it?
I'd have to, because I worked my way through college. I worked full time and I went to school full time, which meant around 10 o'clock at night, I had to do a strip for the next day.
Right.
Or it wasn't for the next day, but
I understand.
I had to turn it in the next day.
Yeah.
So I had like 4 hours from 10 to 2 to do a comic, and I was forced under extreme deadline circumstances and exhaustion and drinking coffee really for the first time in my life. But I felt like a grown up for some reason. Anyway, I know kids drink coffee when they're like 5 now. I had to figure out all the rules of comics. Like you have 4 squares. It's got to be funny at the end.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, it's got to recap where you were the day before, and something new has to happen, and then funny.
Yeah.
And I didn't succeed every time, and the readers would let me know. But I began to have a real relationship with the readers. I knew what was funny. I knew what worked. The stupid rat creatures joke was originally in the Lantern, and I got a huge reaction from that. So later, when I would do the comic book, I went back and I rescued some of those successful jokes and worked them into the story.
Yeah. So what made you think that a comic was like financially sound idea? If you know what I mean, right?
Nothing.
But I mean, so I get. Okay, let me actually back that up. Did you always intend to self-publish, or did you try to get other publishers to publish it first? Like what? How did that bit happen?
In a nutshell, my plan was to do a comic strip.
Yeah.
As I've mentioned a couple of times, I was a huge fan. I was obsessed with Peanuts. I was obsessed with Pogo.
Yep.
As I got older, I got obsessed with Doonesbury. And so I wanted to do a comic strip in the newspaper.
So you were thinking syndication then, in other words.
I wanted to get Bones syndicated.
Yeah.
And I started in 83, I think, 83 to 84. With real sincerity, I was sending submissions to all the syndicates, Tribune Media, King Features, Universal Press. There was I don't know, I feel like there was like 7 or 8 of them. I don't really remember now. And I got nibbles of interest, just enough to like pull me in, keep me going. Interesting story. I was shopping Bone around at the same time that Watterson was shopping Calvin and Hobbes around.
Oh, okay.
And they kept telling me, they could see some potential in Bone. They really liked the Bones, but they wanted me to get rid of all the fantasy stuff that I had in there, the heavy metal stuff.
Right.
Just do the Bones in Boneville. And they were saying, because we're looking for a kids comic right now. We really want a kids comic. We want to focus on that. So if you just get rid of all the fantasy stuff and just do the Bones in Boneville, we think we'd have something. I just couldn't quite. I felt like I had some story in there I wanted to get out. I also had this idea that eventually the comic strip would end. I was going to do a continuity strip that would go on for about 10 years or so. I didn't know, but it was going to climax with an ending. So it'd be a story with a beginning and a middle and an end. Well, that was a deal breaker for them, right?
Sure. You pitched it to them that way? You said to them like, "This is going to end"?
Yeah. Well, there was another. That wasn't even the big deal breaker. The real deal breaker was that Walt Kelly was my hero, and he owned his strip. And there was when he signed it in a little box with a copyright date, Walt Kelly. He owned it. So there's no question that if Walt Kelly owned his strip, I'm owning my strip. So I went in there, and that was like absolutely, that was a deal breaker for them and for me. Sure. Because they had to own the strip. That was just the rules back then.
Right.
So it just didn't work out for me. So that was not really a nutshell, but that was a nutshell. So I was stymied we're talking about like 1984, 85. I was not going to do a comic strip. I had exhausted every syndicate, and they did not want it. They liked me. They wanted me to do something else, and I didn't want to do it. So that's where I was stuck for a while.
And then
I opened up the newspaper one day and saw this whole spread This was in the Columbus Dispatch, but it was like their arts magazine on the weekend. It was this big spread on this new book by a guy named Frank Miller called The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like seriously like 2 to 3 pages about a comic book about Batman.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what the fuck am I looking at? I don't understand. How can this be? So I went, I did know that there was a comic book store. In fact, it was one of the very early comic book stores. It was in Columbus, Ohio. You might remember Rosie, who ran Monkey's Retreat.
Yeah, sure.
So I went to the Monkey's Retreat, found, I think it was on the second or third issue of the 4-issue miniseries of Dark Knight, and went home and read it. Blew my mind.
Right.
I didn't know a comic book could tell a story in that way.
Yeah.
It was like watching a film. Everything moved. The way, I mean, just the choices he made blew my mind. And I thought, and then when it finished after 4 issues, I was like, beginning, middle, end. This medium can do that.
Yeah.
At the same time, while I was going in to buy those, I discovered, there was all the same stuff I remember from when I was a kid. Everything from Archie to Spider-Man and Superman, and I think Crisis was going on.
Sure. Yeah.
But what drew my attention was the section where there was hate and Love and Rockets and Cerebus. I bought issues of all these things, and I got like 2 issues of Cerebus. I remember they were the ones where he was climbing a wall. I think time gets a little shaky looking back at that, but it was like there was like a giant thing that was the Pope or something. I can't remember.
No, 80 around those time in the 80s, it would have to be the early part of High Society. You're probably thinking of where Moonroach dropped statues on people's heads. That's what it's got to be, because the climbing thing was like 5 years later in the 80s of Cerebus.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, my memory is a little.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
But
that was a long ass
what I
time
saw
ago.
was these boutique publishers, small publishers that I'd never heard of, were doing black and white comics, and they were amazing. I mean, Love and Rockets, what? Hate, it was underground comics, but they were calling it alternative comics or something. But to me, it just looked like this is sort of like the next movement from the underground in art, and the talent, Brian, which I know you remember. I was like,
I remember. This
was better than anything else I'd ever seen in comics. There was no other period in comic books like that moment.
Yep.
And it was equivalent in my mind, because my knowledge was based in comic strips, newspaper strips. And I think the golden age of newspaper strips had a high bar, and I think these guys were starting to go beyond that. There was so many comics I'm not even mentioning. The Tick was very, very funny. I mean, the art wasn't quite as advanced as like Jaime Hernandez or those bros, but it was so funny.
Yeah.
And Cerebus was self-published.
Yep.
And so was the Turtles.
Yep.
So I'm going, this is when I'm starting to think, oh, I can't get syndicated. They clearly made it absolutely crystal clear that I will never be syndicated.
Yeah.
And so I started to think, maybe self-publishing, if these guys can do it, maybe this is something I can do and still maintain some control over what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you had only done strips up to that point, which is a very different thing than telling a 20 or 30-page story, whatever it was, for Bone One.
There's 22 to 24 every issue.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you make that jump? How did you?
Brian, it was just pure ignorance is bliss. I just jumped. I went, okay. I had to do a little bit of research just to figure out, like, okay, basically I see, they have color covers, they have black and white interiors. like I did a little research to figure out, like, everybody draws them double, twice up.
Right.
I knew how to draw in ink. That was not a problem. And I learned a very important skill when I was working at the college newspaper, The Lantern, was I knew how thin a line, how delicate a line I could get away with, and still it would still reprint on newsprint. That was a skill that 4 years really taught me. So I was ready. I was ready to do the artwork, but the story or just the timing of the book was absolutely foreign to me. And I just jumped in, and it was great. It was great. I couldn't believe it. Because after 4 years and more, because I spent another 2 years of like doing batches of months of strips for all these different syndicates. I was like, I knew how to tell a joke, but instead of having to cram it into 4 panels, I could take a whole page.
Yeah.
I could take 3 pages.
Yeah.
Or, whatever I needed to tell a joke. And it just felt very natural. And I felt like someone who was breathing air for like the very first time. I was just, well, maybe to mix metaphors, it was more like I was just in the open ocean and I could swim free. It was great.
Yeah.
I felt quite at home.
Wow. I love that. I love that too. Especially because, going from as you described it, a quarter of what you're doing is recapping what happened before, and you always have to end on a joke. So you really only have 2 panels to tell a story.
Yeah.
Right.
I always felt like it could be a joke or it could be a cliffhanger. I felt like those were
sure.
But your mechanics were your toolbox was limited.
Yeah. And it impresses me how the early Bone really works as a page, right? Like, because I'm assuming that in those early days you didn't quite understand the craft of it, right? Like of what a page was yet, right? Because you were still figuring it out, or is that, or you just a savant?
No. What guided me was my idea of a joke ending. I kind of treated the page, especially in the early days, as like, this is a moment. This is like a strip.
Yeah.
So I wasn't stuck to 4 panels. I could have 6 or I could have 2.
Yeah.
Depending on what worked.
Yeah.
But I kind of felt like at the end of the page, complete a thought, equivalent to like what a strip would have been.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't strict though. I didn't have to do that. But I found that it worked. And I definitely, when you were on the right-hand page, the odd number page, that you're going to do a page turn.
Yeah.
I definitely was always aware of that. I still am to this day.
Yeah.
I am aware of that page turn has to be something that intrigues, and then you turn it, and then this is sort of like the strip thing. I need to remind you real quick where you just were.
Yeah.
Even though you just turned a page, that's all you did is turn a page. But your concentration just had a slight blip of a break. And so I got to pull you back in that first upper left panel.
Yeah. How long did it take you to figure that out? I mean, did you figure that out from issue one?
It was a growing process. It was a learning process. I realized pretty quickly, probably within the first issue, that this is a new thing. And I need to learn how to play with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And,
I imagine too, it's different the first time, and tell me if I'm wrong, when you're drawing the boards versus when you get that comic book in your hand and you're looking at it and going, oh, this is an object now.
It's very different. I have one strange editing skill, and that is I go over the comic over and over again, because first you write it as little thumbnails, and eventually you get to the point where you've got it out on boards. But I try to do it. I don't do one page and then the next page. I lay out all 22 pages.
Yeah.
I know what they are. First I get the lettering in because I need to know how much space is going to be taken up by the lettering.
Yeah.
And then I start putting in the artwork. And I usually refer to my little thumbnails to know what the staging is and all that.
Yeah.
But then there's this process of going. I would lay all 22 pages out on the floor or on a couch or whatever, and I would just read it over and over again. And usually I'm inking the faces first on every page.
Okay.
And then you start inking the rest of the characters on every page. And I do that because at the end you're running out of time.
Yeah.
And I want all the acting and all the acting in the faces is done.
Yeah.
I know it works. I know it's good. And then I can blow off the backgrounds a little bit. If FedEx is standing on the step, I can just put a black background in. Don't laugh, man. That happened more than once.
No, I'm laughing because it happened. That's right, why I'm laughing.
Right. So, but what I was getting at was that as you go through these 22 pages over and over and over again, you're re-editing.
Yeah.
The whole time, and it changes. A penciled phone bone jumping off of over a log or something has a different pacing than when you start to ink him, because as it becomes a little more solid. I assume you know a lot of this stuff I'm saying, Brian, and I think you're coaxing me to say it for people watching. But as you start inking it, it becomes more solid, and your eye starts to slow down when you have more solid things to look at. When there's a black inked log, you stop and look at that, and it changes the pacing. So you have to be aware of that. So there's all sorts of little editing. You want to speed things up. Oh, I slowed your eye down because I had an extra word balloon there. Take that word balloon out. It's not important. It's more important that you get to the next panel. Don't stop and read a balloon. Go.
Yeah.
So that would go on for the entire 2 months in between each issue while I'm working on it.
Wow,
I
do know it, but I only know it intellectually because I don't draw comics, and it's a skill I frankly don't understand, and I love hearing people talk about it because I don't understand it, but I get it. I understand. I mean, I understand the intellectual process of it, but that friction, I don't know.
Well, the next step of that is that it's printed in the book.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, this is my personal reading copy. It's very beat up.
Yeah.
Of Bone Number 1.
Yeah.
It's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. And the pages are all yellow.
Yellow. Yeah. Love it.
But once the day this showed up in a box was, of course, as wonderful as you think it would be. But I was never in love with what I did. I was able to read this as if I didn't write it. And that's why later when I would collect the books in trade paperbacks, or we call them graphic novels now.
Yeah.
But when I would collect them, every time I would go back to print, I would try to improve them. Like that joke didn't quite read, or I hated that hand.
Yeah.
I'll redraw that hand, my Jack Kirby hand.
Yeah.
So I never was in love with what I did. I was always I had a critical eye. It wasn't until after 12, 13 years that we did the 1 volume edition.
Right.
I brought my props with me.
Yeah.
This was when I did the final book and collected it all together. That's when I was done inking.
Yeah.
That's when I was done. That's when I was done writing and tweaking.
Yeah. It didn't change again with Scholastic and the color edition?
Not really. I mean, I might have changed 1 or 2 little things. Hey, can we take a quick break? Can we just?
Oh yeah, sure.
All right, let's do that. I just need to take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Do it. I'll vamp. I'm vamping. Yeah, so that's Jeff Smith talking about his process. We're going to take some questions here, I think, because Jordan was getting the piece of paper to tell me that there were questions. So if you have a sensible question for Jeff, but make it a question that you don't think I'm going to ask, all right? Because I'm probably going to ask your question, honestly. you can trust me. I'm going to ask your question, but ask it here on the side. As a YouTube or a Facebook comment. The Graphic Novel Month Club, I just, for all you people who are watching, maybe this is the first time you're watching, every month we pick 3 different books. We pick a book it's a brand new book aimed at kids, middle readers. We pick a brand new book that's aimed at adults that was newly released that month. And then we pick a classic graphic novel, which could be anything from the whole history of comics. And so this is the classic club that we're on. And that's why we're talking to Jeff Smith. You're putting up the questions, Jordan. What are you doing? What are you doing, man? Yeah, and I think it's a pretty cool program. It's a reasonable fee every month, and you get a curated graphic novel that is being picked by me and my staff, who know a lot about comics and who love comics. Hopefully this the love of comics is getting communicated across here. The worst part is I know that Jeff's going to pee, and I also have to pee, and I feel like I should go do that, but then we have dead air. No, I can't have dead air. Zoe, do you want to talk on air? No, you don't want to talk. Yeah, she said, "Go, leave the camera. It's fine. Just have dead air. It's totally cool." Oh, yeah, it is all good. It is all good. But anyway, so the reason that this is my PBS moment, right? Is join the clubs, and then that's what keeps the store alive, and what keeps paying my staff. Because we had this little pandemic thing which kind of messed everything up, and business is not back to normal in San Francisco yet, because we're a tourist town and there aren't any tourists yet, and things like that. And we'll get you really, really good books, and then along with it, we'll get you really good conversations with people, and then we'll get you things like this. This is a special book plate that Jeff did just for this book and this edition. And it's signed. It's personally signed by him at the bottom. Like that's not printed onto the art. He hand signed those, and it's an original piece of artwork. And it's even, you can see it's dated 2021. That's awesome. It's awesome. So the whole program's awesome. So join. I hope he's coming back. I feel like he's standing off to the side, waiting to see when I run out of steam.
No, I'm not doing that at all.
All right.
Sorry about that.
All right. No, it's all good, man. It's all good. I been there, done that. Cool. And we're just getting started. That's the fun part too. Okay. So how did you figure out how to publish the comic, or was that all Vijaya's work?
No, it was both of us. I mean, I did a lot of the initial groundwork.
Yeah.
I will say that a crucial moment was when I kind of was falling in love with this idea of doing Bone as a comic book in the direct market. Mm-hmm. And I'd already started to do the research. Back then, you had to actually go to the library. Mm-hmm. I think I visited a capital city distribution center, because there was one in like every city back in the 90s. And
every big city, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, not every city, but a lot of cities. Yeah. So I had started to piece together, the distribution system. There were like I want to say like 11 distributors back then.
That sounds about right at that time.
Yeah, like Comics Hawaii.
Yep.
Friendly Franks and all that stuff. So there was like 11 distributors. They all had a catalog. So I figured out the way comics got into the catalog. I figured out how they got into the stores, and figured out how the retailers got them, that they were non-returnable, all that inside baseball stuff. But Vijaya, when I said I'm serious about this, I want to do it. And Vijaya, she loves cartoons as much as I do. And we've always, we could speak in cartoons. We can, Bugs Bunny lines come out of our mouth, or Simpsons lines, all the time. But she said, okay, if you're serious about this, you have to write a business plan. And she said, a real business plan, like that we could take to the bank and show a banker, and he will give us money because of what you wrote.
Yeah.
That was, I can't stress to anyone who's thinking about doing something like this in any venture, how important that is to go learn how your industry works, how money flows, where it comes, where it goes, how long it takes to do that.
Yep.
All those things I had to fit into. Basically, it felt like a Jenga tower to get from me drawing bone on my kitchen table to getting on the store shelf.
Yeah.
There's so many pieces and parts, and I needed to know how much time it would take to do just the covers. There was no Photoshop back then, so I had to do the artwork for the cover was one thing, and then it had overlays like onion skin tracing paper with the logo on it and the number and my name and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The price. You had to have a total understanding of how long it would take you to do your book, get it into the system, and get money back for it, so you could pay the printer.
Yeah.
And to understand that there might be a little bit of money left over.
Yeah.
So, and that was, if she hadn't done that, I doubt I'd be talking to you today, Brian.
Right.
Because that was that's how we figured out how to do it and make it happen. So then it was a question of doing the books. And let me skip ahead a little bit. I had agreed with Vijaya that I would do this for 1 year, 6 books, do them on a bi-monthly schedule, which is what I remember most independent books were doing at that time.
Yep.
And I believed I could do that. And I did for a long time. It was at the end where I started to slow down. But in the beginning, I held that up. I had pretty much did 5 or 6 issues a year.
Yeah.
And the first 4 issues started at this level, which was not very high. I think it was like 1,500 copies, and went down for the first 4 issues.
Right.
And I told Vijaya, if at issue 6, we don't have some reason to hope or to go forward, then I'll just quit and I'll go back to animation or commercial art. And when the 3rd issue hit, well, the 4th issue was already done and was in the pipeline. The 3rd issue hit, I started to get letters from people who were in the industry, people that worked at Marvel. Tom Brevoort sent me a letter. I didn't know who he was at the time.
Right.
Charles Vess sent me a letter.
Wow.
And again, these are not people whose names I knew because asked me anything about newspaper strips and cartoonists. So I only knew, I knew a couple names like Dave Sim, and I'd heard of Neil Gaiman. But I had not yet, at that point, I had not really read. I'd read like 2 issues of Cerebus, and I'd read no Sandman at that point. Yeah. And then I got a phone call from a guy in Toronto, Mark Asquith, who had a show called Prisoners of Gravity.
Yeah, that was a great show.
It was a good show. And again, this was like reading about Dark Knight in the newspaper. It's like, what? There's a TV show about comic books?
Yeah.
And he wanted to talk to me. He didn't want me to be on the show or anything at that point. But he just wanted to say, I read the first 3 issues, and I just want to encourage you and tell you that I'm super excited. And he sent me a VHS tape of a show of Prisoners of Gravity. He says, watch it all the way to the end. And I watched it all the way to the end. And at the very end, he's interviewing Neil Gaiman, this kind of guy who I'm starting to read a lot about in the Comics Buyer's Guide with this Sandman book. And somebody had given him, probably Mark Asquith, had given Neil the first 3 issues, and he read them while he was sitting in an airport waiting to get on a plane or something. Yeah. And he gave this huge, he goes, this book is great. I love this book. You should read it. And Vijay and I we probably did like a complete plop out of the frame thing. And that was one of the things that gave me the courage to keep going, even though the sales had been dropping. So,
right, and my memory is around that same time, around 3 or 4. I remember you saying at one point that your sales were down to like 600 copies or 800 copies. Like you you were at break even at that point. It was not
Yeah,
like
we
you're not
were
making
just
any money.
barely break even. I mean,
Yeah.
there was no profit. We were just paying the printer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was scary, and I was starting to think I might have to get realistic about it. But then Neil said that, and then at the same time, number 4 got a tiny little blurb in the back of a comics journal.
Yeah.
And then Charles Vess called me, and out of the blue, he got my number from Mark Asquith, and he said, "Are you going to go to San Diego this year?" And I said, "What's San Diego? That's Comic-Con." And I said, "What's San Diego?" He goes, "You got to go." He goes, "Oh man, you got to go. Everybody goes. If you can get yourself out there." And he gave me the dates and everything. You can sit. You can have half my table. You can sit there. So I went, and I met so many people. I'm overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed. I want to say like that. In those days, Brian, everybody was in the same hotel, right?
Yeah.
There's just one hotel, so we're all in the DoubleTree or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
It was, and there's Jaime Hernandez.
Yeah.
There's Neil Gaiman. Then after that, I went to WonderCon and I met Neil Gaiman and I met Frank Miller.
Yeah.
And they actually came up to me and bought me a beer and clapped me on the back. So even though my sales had kind of were really shitty, I was getting enough kind of encouragement that I'm like, and Vijay agreed. Let's go another year. Yeah. And then of course around issue 8, things just like blew up.
Yeah, because a lot of it is too. It's the way the comic book retailers order, right? Like it takes us 3 or 4 issues to figure out what the sales are, and then wait, people might actually like this. Let's order more. But because we're ordering 2 issues in advance, there's like a lag to it before we actually catch it up.
I never wanted your job, man. That was because those catalogs they're just they're overwhelming.
Yeah.
So much like color and loudness.
Yeah.
And there were, like we said, like 11 of them back then, although some of them were real thin.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was back then. Now they're like so much thicker, and now everybody's got like 5 covers on every comic book. And it's just like, ADD. I can't. That's why we sell more graphic novels these days, because they're easier to deal with, honestly.
Yeah, and a higher profit point.
Yeah. And then it started going crazy, and you started actually like doubling in sales every issue or something, right? Yeah, no, that was exactly right. And I was talking with Billy Tucci. Mm-hmm. He's the one who talked me into doing a Kickstarter for my next project. Yeah.
But so he had me on as a podcast, and he was kind of reminiscing or remembering, the 90s, and we were sort of like this. This is kind of fun. I'm enjoying this. By the way,
I am too.
Like, we're talking about this was there was so much happening, but he termed it this way. He says, "Do you remember the moment?" He says, when Bone took off, he says, because it felt to the rest of us like it was a light switch, like it just went on. And I said, yeah, nobody's ever really talked to me about that before, but it did just go on like a switch. And I almost didn't have time to like process it, because I was always chasing the deadline to get the book out. And there was all these other things. And by then, of course, Vijaya had become my true full-time. She was always my partner and it always helped me. But by that point, she left her day job and was my full-time partner.
Yeah.
But there was so much going on, and all of a sudden it did feel like a light switch went on, and it felt like almost like the cover of Bone with the spotlight coming down. But everybody was all of a sudden turned to look at you, and I never really like articulated that before. But all of a sudden everybody wanted, trading cards, T-shirts, pins, artwork for all this stuff. All of a sudden, San Diego Comic-Con had they used to have that pro, I don't remember what they called it, but it was the pro night, like Wednesday or something, or Thursday, I don't remember. But they asked me to do a piece of art, and I brought this is not the poster, but they asked me to do an exclusive poster for just the retailers in '94.
Yeah,
that was a big deal. All of a sudden, everybody knew who I was, and it was exciting. It was just it really was exciting. I can't.
And the thing about that time that I think really gets lost today is there was a genuine movement then that creators could actually benefit from their own artwork, right? Yeah. Like you could work in Marvel and DC and you'd make more money, probably. I mean, at a point in the
short term,
right? You'd get
you might have benefits.
You
at least have insurance back then.
But I remember as a retailer really feeling like my job was to help you guys figure out how you could own the work and make money from it for the rest of your life, right? Like it, and it happened as a movement, right? There was a good 30 or 40 cartoonists sort of in that movement to make it happen, and then it all kind of petered out all at once.
Wow, boy, summarizing this. At some point, it became the self-publishing movement.
Yeah.
I mean, self-publishing obviously had existed. There was all sorts of self-publishers. And of course, there was Cerebus and ElfQuest and the Turtles with Mirage Comics. But at some point, there was it became a movement. And I always felt it was kind of spontaneous. I don't think there was like a manifesto that I was ever aware of.
Yeah.
Other than like Scott McCloud discussing, the broad virtues of comics and owning your own work. But absolutely, I do remember spending many nights in Dave Sims' suite.
Yeah.
At whatever city we were in, Dave always rented the penthouse.
Yep.
And we would all go up there and hang out, and we would talk about comics all night till the sun came up. And that's all we talked about. And one of the big concepts was how do we how do we sell our books like you would in a bookstore, so that you don't take issue number 12 down and put it in a long box when issue 13 comes out.
Yep.
You keep it up there like a bookstore, like like the Lord of the Rings or Huckleberry Finn or Moby Dick or whatever. And it was really important to everybody that I want to make money on Bone. Here's my first issue of Bone. Here's the first page of Bone. There it is. There's the first page of Bone. Well, here, 30 years later, I'm still selling this book.
Yep.
And there's that first page again.
Yep.
I'm still making money. I'm still making revenue off of that drawing I did 30 years ago.
Yep.
So, and that was we talked about that. That was a real concept that we believed in, and we really wanted it to happen. And I do remember the core of that group was Dave, me, Colleen, Larry Martyr, Kim Veach, Steve Bissett. There were lots of others, but those were the guys who intellectually Scott McCloud, even people that weren't entirely self-published. Scott McCloud, Neil Gaiman was there and all those things.
Absolutely.
And there were retailers like you.
The Rory.
That were part of this this idea that there's a new way to sell comics. There's a new way to for the ownership to go. All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, it was heady and exciting times. I remember many of those conversations very well. And the thing that all these years later, right? You're the only one of that group who is still benefiting from that system in that way, right?
Well, probably in some. I didn't mention Terry Moore.
Terry, right? Sure, yeah.
Terry was there at that time, and Terry is also still completely benefiting from that same system. Probably he and I are the two left standing in some ways, but I mean, Colleen is, she is she is still turning out award-winning work.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not, Distant Soil is not a thing that particularly sells or anyone
I know, and I still
knows about anymore in a way,
I still think,
Tyrant, not in print, I was talking to Bassett about this, like, let's get Tyrant back in print. That book should sell till the end of time,
but that just runs with the individual, the artist.
Yeah.
The artist is still an artist.
Yeah. No, I believe me, I understand. I just I've always been disappointed that more of you didn't continue to make that step for the rest of your lives. And one of the ongoing themes of this show is that I'm genuinely worried about a lot of cartoonists today who are who they're giving up a lot of their work for a book advance that will barely earn out, and then they're not going to do comics, right? Like, they're not. I don't know, man. You're in such a rarefied position that you still own the underlying parts of your work.
That's because of Walt Kelly.
Yeah. Thank you, Walt Kelly.
Thank you, Walt Kelly.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic, and I think it's the thing that everybody should strive to do, because yeah. So
it's definitely the road less traveled, and it's not easy. You do have to have a support system. Like Vijaya has been an amazing partner.
Well, actually, so maybe that's the thing that separates you and Terry from everybody else.
It might be. Because Robin is absolutely his 50-50 partner. She is right there. Literally, last time I was at their house, their studios, her desk and his desk are in the same room. Now, Jay and I, we've decided that there would be a murder-suicide if that was the situation. But so we have separate rooms, but they are literally right there, and they make every decision together.
Yeah.
Here's what I think I want to draw today. Yes, Terry, that's a great idea. Let's do that. I mean, they are right there together.
Yeah.
And the same with who I just reconnected with, Billy Tucci and his wife Deborah, and Francisca and Brian Polito.
Yeah.
I hadn't talked to them in. Well, I mean, I'll see them at San Diego and stuff because we're all in a pavilion. I would always see them, but we really kind of connected over podcasts and Zooms just in the last year or so.
Yeah,
and they're doing Kickstarter, but we'll talk about that later if we have time.
Yeah,
but both of those, they still sell a lot of comic books. They still sell big numbers, and those women are as important to that team as
at least as important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that partnership of having someone else who has your back, because a lot of artists have artist brain, and they don't have business brain.
I have no idea what you're talking about. What day of the week is this, by the
way? Is there a deadline?
I have friends. Most of my friends in real life have nothing to do with comics. And I have one friend who just loves to just real quick. I'm like, what day is it, Jeff? And I'm like, is it a weekday? I don't know.
Well, if it helps, I know what day of the week it is because it's New Comics Day.
Right.
My whole life is like, is it Wednesday?
Is it Wednesday?
Is today Wednesday? So and today is Wednesday, so it works out that way.
You did this on New Comic Book Day. You must have a good staff.
I do have. I have an awesome staff. I could not do this without the awesome staff.
You have two shops too.
I do. Yeah. I love one though. I love one a lot, and the other one I have. So, well, you laugh, but stop.
If you love it so much, the other store is going, if you love it so much, why don't you marry it?
Yeah. Well, no, because there was a store that was going to go out of business, and so I didn't want it to go out of business, and so I have another store because I didn't want that store to go out of business, as opposed to this one, which I built this with my blood, sweat, and tears.
But I don't know that story. What store did you buy?
So it's a store called Comic Outpost. It's a store out on Ocean Avenue. It's like on the south side of the city. It doesn't really matter. That's a different interview. That's a totally different interview.
All right. I'm sorry.
So did the like when the first collection came out, which is this book, but not this version of it, because this is the color version. Did that like change the game?
Yeah, unbelievably, because the comic book kind of picked up around the cow race, which was around issues 8 to 10.
Yeah,
and I was preparing part of the business plan that Vijay and I crafted included collecting each year's comics into a trade paperback so that people could follow the story. Because as I mentioned earlier, I always want to do one story that would have an ending, a beginning, a middle, and an end. But it's fun to look at my 1989 business plan or whenever it was, where I to the banker, I said, we couldn't collect them in trade paperback collections or graphic novels. I had these quotation marks. There was a moment where things were kind of working together, where it was taking off with readers, with retailers, with the critics, and other cartoonists were saying great things about it. At the same time, that was when the cow race was all happening. And I was preparing to come to San Diego with that first book. Yeah. It was in black and white and had a different cover, and I published it, not Scholastic.
Yeah.
But I showed up, and I believe that was 93, I think. And people were waiting for me. I mean, people were waiting for this. They now had heard about it because of the cow race and read about it in the CBG, and even Wizard was covering Bone, which I never understood, but I was grateful. This was the first time I ever experienced like craziness. I had one helper who just helped me ship stuff, and he went on the road with me to San Diego. We lived in the Bay Area at that time.
Yeah.
And we set up at a little table. We didn't have a booth or anything. And there was just a mob. We didn't understand how to even control, like have lines or anything. And I just remember, I've told this story many times, but I'll tell it again because it's ridiculous. I remember I was standing there and I'm looking out, and there's just this wall of people, like 4 or 5 deep. And people are reaching past people's shoulders with wads of money in their hands, cash. And I'm trying to like my helper. He was like, he loved money. He thought that was so cool. He's like getting this money in, and he's kind of keeping track of like, okay, you got to sign that guy's book. You got to sign that guy's book next. And then I'm trying to sign and draw a little picture and everything. And it was crazy. And we went home at the end of the day, and we just had I worked on loading docks, dude. I mean, I had minimum wage. Yeah. I never had rolls of money jammed in my pockets. And we'd go back to the hotel room, and we'd throw it out on the bed. This is in our pockets. We didn't even have a shoebox. What were we thinking? And it was so much fun because Garrett, his name was Garrett Chin. He was really great. He was my first helper for a couple of years. I mean, he was like Phony Bone. He's like throwing the wads of money up and it's dropping on his head. And we're like, whoa, we can't believe this. It was so much fun. And I actually, so that was really a game changer. And I think that might have been the year that I started winning some Eisner Awards, which Neil predicted.
Right.
He told me, he said, you're going to have your name on a piece of wood this year.
Yeah.
Which meant carved on the plaque.
Yeah. I knew what you meant. Yeah. No. And what, you ended up winning 11 Eisners? Is that right?
Yeah. Over the course of Bone. Yeah.
14 Harveys.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you're a cartoonist.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that you didn't come into this to do comics. That's the part that I kind of love about this whole art.
I wanted to do comics.
Well, you wanted to do strips. They're different things.
I know. They were. And it was actually kind of interesting that Scott McCloud exploded on the scene at that same moment.
Yeah.
Because he began to talk about comics as a broader thought than just comic books or comic strips. You begin to think about, the panels and all that. Very interesting thought, which that whatever year he was working on it, I don't know if it was 92 or 93. I think it was 93. Because I kind of have a memory. I have a very clear memory of Larry Marder dragging me over to Scott McCloud's table. And he's like, this guy, he does this thing called Zot, but he's working on something and you've got to look at it.
Yeah.
And it had to be 93. That's the part I can't remember if it had to be 93. Anyway, he drags me over and introduces me to Scott McCloud. He's got a stack about this big of original art at his little table. And he's just showing people this is stuff he was working on. And it was understanding comics. And it was about 3/4 of the way done. Do you remember that year?
I do. In fact, yeah, I got a photo, one of the early photocopies of it.
So, well, I'm just looking through this stuff, and I don't. Again, like you're pointing out, I really didn't know anything about comic books or any people I'm being introduced to, and I'm just flipping through this stuff, and I'm like, this is real. Yeah, this is real stuff.
Yeah,
that I didn't know anybody could name.
Yep.
I thought it was just stuff that you kind of had to kind of get through osmosis by reading Neil Adams and Joe Kubert and Walt Kelly, and he was saying it, and so I think that was a big part of, like you were talking about, this exciting scene that happened in this movement.
Yep.
And Scott McCloud was part of that movement.
Absolutely.
He wasn't self-publishing, but he was inventing words and names for things that that actually Will Eisner and Jack Kirby had actually kind of invented.
Yeah.
But had never named.
Yeah.
And I was part of the generation that was just still continuing it, knew about it, but kind of didn't know that there were rules or names to it. So that was all very exciting. It was a really interesting time.
Sure. So there's something I want to ask you about here, which is Bone's always been an all ages book, but the comics market at the time was very much not for kids, right? Like it was all structured around selling adults comics, right? Yeah. And
comics was proud of that. And comics was proud of that because comics had been for so many years, it was dumbed down. It was like it was just for kids. It was just junk. Yeah. But and comics was proud that starting with even with heavy metal in the 70s and Corbin and the underground, it was. I was proud of comics being thought of that way. However, yes, you're right. When Bone came out, I don't like the term all ages comics, but I may have coined it because there was a moment right around this period we're talking about in the mid 90s when Bone was exploding, and not just Bone, but all sorts of things like Scott McCloud and Sandman and the self-publishing movement. People were talking about Bone as a kid's comic,
right? And
as you just alluded, there were no kids reading comics. There were kids reading comics, but not many.
Yeah,
So I felt like I needed to push back against that, because if Bone was accepted and labeled as a children's comic, I would be in trouble, because adults would stop reading it and there's no kids to pick up the slack at that time. So I started using the term all ages as often as I could in every interview I did, or just in conversations with people, because I just could not be a children's comic, which is ironic that I had this kind of battle with the comics media. Since I became a children's comic for sure when I went to Scholastic. But
well,
at
and
that
so
time,
and so this is where I wanted to take this is that those color editions of Bone, I think, arguably kicked off what has become a middle grade revolution. Like what graphics did changed everything about the way comics are sold and handled and dealt with. It took a couple years, you know.
Yeah, I don't think you even need to use the word arguably. It was that is a definite dividing line.
Yeah.
And in fact, sadly, Dick Robinson just passed away. He was the family head and he was the CEO of Scholastic. And while there were a lot of people at that company that were involved in bringing Bone in to this children's book world and creating an imprint just for graphic novels for YA groups. Mm-hmm. It was really Dick was the final decision. So I was really sad to learn that he passed just extremely recently.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that they took comics and made it put it in the bookstore, not in a special section, although it's back into a special section,
right?
But in a good way.
Yeah,
but
a good way.
Back then, it was like if you went and saw a graphic novel, it might be Watchmen, it might be a Fantagraphics book,
right?
But it was shelved with the Dungeons and Dragons rule books.
Yep.
It was terrible. It was just flying out. It was always in a complete disarray. It was a shambles. It was shameful.
Yeah.
But Scholastic said, we're gonna publish, we're gonna create a new imprint, launch it with Bone, and we're gonna put it in the book in the kids section with Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Which was exactly what Vijay and I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Especially the Harry Potter part.
Yeah.
But they did it. They were true to their word. They were the first ones to take a graphic novel and market it like it was a book, sell it like it was a book, and keep it in print like it was a book.
Yeah, I mean, I think to an extent, the only way they could do that was the fact that you had already done the work. Do you know what I mean? Like you had 9 books ready to go. I mean, they were ready to go.
Yeah, that was a. Let me try to condense this a little bit real quickly. So when we first heard from Scholastic, I actually heard from Art Spiegelman because he and Francois were trying, his wife Francois Mouly, who had done Raw together and have both worked at the New Yorker together. Had approached Scholastic about doing graphic novels for kids imprint. And now there's different stories from different camps here, but my understanding is that there was also people at Scholastic who wanted to start publishing graphic novels. And whether you talk to Art and Francois, whether you talk to some of the editors at Scholastic, they both say that they wanted to launch this book with Bone. And apparently these conversations went on for like 6 months as they prepared to do this. And Vijay and I knew nothing about this. And finally they contacted us. But my first contact was with Art. And he was like, we're going to do this with Scholastic. And he was pushing the color. He was the one who said it should be in color.
Yeah.
Shorten this story. I ended up at Art's enthusiastic pushing to sign a deal with Scholastic. I don't know exactly what happened, but Art and Francois did not sign their deal with Scholastic. They went on to create Toon Books, which I've done books with them too.
Yep.
So I didn't end up working with them with the graphics line, but. I'm sorry, I lost it.
No.
Sorry.
No. That's all good. Let me ask about the color because you say that Art was kind of pushing you towards that. Were you hesitant to that at the beginning, or?
Yeah, very. I did not want to do it in color. Oh, I know what we were talking about was that the books were done.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But we'll start with the color. Yeah, the books were complete. Vijaya, one of her jobs is licensing, and she had licensed Bone into, I don't remember now, but it was like between 15 and 20 languages already being published around the world in black and white, and it was complete. Or I think there might have been one more book I was working on. I might have been finishing Bone while we were having this conversation. But yeah, Art thought it should be in color, partly to differentiate it from the books Vijay and I have been publishing for the last 12 years.
Yeah.
But I've told this story before, but if you haven't heard it, it's a good story. He was pushing the color, and I said, "But Art, I love black and white. I mean, I love comic strips. That's my genesis, and I love Mouse. I discovered Mouse right around the same time I discovered Dark Knight Returns, and it was one of the pivotal discoveries that made me want to do graphic novels. Here was a book with a beginning and a middle and an end. This was proving that literature could be created and accepted. And so I said, so Mouse is in black and white, and I learned to make black and white with all my heart and soul. And he said, Mouse should be in color because it's about war and the Holocaust. No, I know. I'm sorry. I said that wrong.
I understood what you meant.
It's black and white, and it should be in black and white because it's about the war and the Holocaust.
Right.
He says, but Bone should be in color because it's about life, and it won't be finished until it's in color. And I was like, okay, Art. Well, so I did some experiments in color, and Scholastic liked it, and I did like the idea of it being something different than what Vijay and I had done.
Yeah.
So that's how the color came about.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm guessing that much like how going from the periodical to having your first graphic novel was a quantum leap, going from self-publishing the graphic novels to having Scholastic, and not just in bookstores, but also book fairs, Scholastic book fairs. This is the secret weapon of Scholastic that, I mean, we all know about, I guess, but we don't really talk about enough is that they're selling directly to kids on a day that it's like, kids, buy books.
That little catalog that you used to get.
And the kids are excited by it. I remember being excited by it.
I was totally excited.
Years ago. And yeah.
No, go on. I was excited by it too. I used to order Marmaduke books.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm assuming that then there was this other quantum leap that happened again in sales at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. It dwarfed anything we had done previously. Right. I mean, we had done pretty well, but not by Scholastic standards.
Yeah.
But to just to top off what you were asking about we were able to do it because the book was done and proven. It was
right.
It was read by people all around the world in multiple languages.
Right.
So the day we were signing the contract this is for the very first graphics book, where Vijay and I fly to New York. We've negotiated the deal, over 6 months, the contract, as typical. But we're going to go to New York for the signing ceremony, and we're going to meet the marketing team. We're going to meet this team and the internet team, all that. The marketing team and the PR team are different. Anyway, so we go there and we go out to dinner with them the night before, and we really love everybody. They're a very good crew.
Yeah.
But our meeting, so the next morning, we're getting ready. We're supposed to be there like at 11 or something. We get a call like around 9:30 from Jean Fywell or her office saying, that was the publisher at the time. Yeah. Jean would like you to come in like 15 minutes early. She just has something she wants to discuss with you. And we were like, okay. So we hang up, and Vijay and I look at each other and we're like, that doesn't sound good. We had this, we just all of a sudden we're like, they're going to be upset because the dragon smokes a cigarette or something.
Right.
We knew something was up. And we looked at each other and we said, all right, we're not going to agree to any changes. This book is complete. We're not going to agree to any changes. and we both were solid on that, right? Right?
Yeah.
We did? Yes. So we call him back. He says, we're going to come in an hour early. So we showed up an hour early. We're in the Jean's office. We sat down, pleasantries. And all of a sudden she reaches down, she picks up a stack of the black and white 9 books or it might have only been 8 at that point. No, it was all 9 books. And sets it on the table. And in it, you can see dozens and dozens of posters.
Oh, man.
Sticking out of this stack of books.
Wow.
And I can see words on it, written on it like beer, gambling, the word G's. I have the character say Jeez.
Yeah.
There's dozens and dozens of these things. So I just look at it, and she starts to try to explain. Oh well, some of the different departments, like the book fairs, they're kind of uncomfortable with these kinds of things. Can we they're just minor changes? Can we just change it? So when they're having beer or something at the tavern, can we just call it like butter beer, like they do in Harry Potter? Yeah. And this, I had flashbacks, because the breaking point for me when I was dealing with the syndicates back when I was trying to sell it as a strip was one of the syndicate guys said, maybe if you just had the Bones talk in thought balloons. And I said, okay, why would the Bones talk in thought balloons? They don't have ESP. He says, because Garfield talks in thought balloons.
Right.
That was actually the moment that broke me, and I realized I was never going to do a comic.
Right.
So, boom, I'm right back there. Butterbeer. And Vijay and I together said, look, we never said this was a children's book. We just made this book, and it's all around the world, and it's people, it's children and parents and teachers and librarians all over the world that said it was a children's book, not us.
Right.
It's done. And thank you for working with us, but we're not going to make any changes at this point. It's too late. It's done. And it's already out in the world. And to her credit, and to Dick's credit, he was the CEO, she took that pile of books, one beat, picked up the books and set them on the floor and says, well, the rest of the departments are just going to have to catch up. We're doing this.
Nice.
And we did it. And oh my God. And Dick, who was just so wonderful to me and so accepting of the idea of comics in his line. Yeah. That decision that he made changed the game. It changed the game. And he went and bought, he thought the Bones looked like schmooze, which meant something to him, right? He was that generation. He got me one of those out of print kitchen sink collections of Lil Abner with the schmooze and gave it to me. Oh, it was a great moment. It was great.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's great. That I don't know. Everything about this whole story makes me so happy. I'm sure.
Well, I'm glad you're letting me tell it. We're really going on here.
Yeah. All right. Is it too long? We need to.
No. I'm a blast. I mean,
exactly. We have a question about color from the audience that Jordan wants me to put up, and it's from Andrew and Tillis. In my opinion, Bone has a very different tone in color versus black and white. In black and white, it has more of a horror tone, whereas in color, it's very cute and cartoony. How do you feel that the use of color changes comics? That's actually a very sensible question. I'm going to let you answer that. I'm also going to run to the bathroom while you're doing that. So speak for a minute, okay?
All right, I'll go slow. Well, as I said, I had a little trouble adjusting to the idea of it being in color. But Scholastic, to be honest, didn't care if it was in color or not. That was sort of an idea that had begun with Art Spiegelman. But we were now committed to doing it in color, and they were totally cool with me hiring someone in-house to color it under my supervision. Now, I never colored a comic before, and I don't know I don't think I particularly had any skills at it. But I do. So I had a guy named Steve Hamaker who worked with me at Cartoon Books, who mostly made like toys and art that wasn't on the comic. Anything I needed to do or pull together, he did that for me. And he was interested in doing color. Turned out he had a natural palette that I thought worked really, really well with Bone. I think we struggled. When you look, I look back on it, the 9 volumes. The first volume looks a little more candy-like to me than it becomes later on. But I think that was because the two of us were learning how to do it together from scratch. Steve did all the heavy lifting. Like I said, it's mostly his palette, and he knew Photoshop, which I knew nothing about at that time. My final thing is, yeah, it's different. Scholastic, another very cool thing they did, and was that for a moment, when we made a deal with Scholastic, I took the 1 volume edition, which I showed earlier.
Yeah.
I took this off the market. This is published by Cartoon Books, the J.
Yep.
We took that off the market to allow the Scholastic books to, appear and get a hand and breathe.
Yep.
But I had an unexpected effect hit me. I missed it. I felt like that big omnibus book had really made an impact in 2004 when Vijay and I showed up to San Diego at the Comic-Con with this giant freaking book with pallets of this thing.
Yeah.
And here it was on the shelves of bookstores and comic book stores, and all of a sudden it was gone. And I felt like that was like a piece of history that was important to me. So I went to Scholastic and I said, can we still do, I said, will you still publish this? Will you still publish the black and white 1 volume edition?
Yeah.
And my memory is that they asked like, well, how much, how many of these have you sold? And I was like, we sold like, I can't remember. It might've been only 50,000, it might've been 100,000.
Right.
But it was something that I was really proud of.
Right.
And they were like, oh, well, you just published that. We don't really need to worry about it. So,
sorry.
I know. So for me, the important thing is both these exist.
Yeah.
This is still, I don't know. It's like I don't know how many printings it's into now. It's like
13 or 14, I want to say.
I think it's more than that. I think it
okay.
is. But I think this is the first printing, so I can't look. But yeah, so yes, the color. There are people, and for sure kids, that like the color better. There are people that like the color version. That's what they like, and they don't like the black and white version. Yeah. But this is still out there. Yeah. It still sells very well. Yep. And this is the one I like this one better. This to me is where my heart is. But I like the color too. And if people, the choice is there. People want it either way. Yeah. No, I love that. And as I said, I mean, I think that Bone really kicked off this wave of middle grade books, and it's because you were able to put out those 9 books in color in a relatively short amount of time. It took us 6 months to color one. Yep. That's still a long time. That was a lot. That's a lot to color and learn. Sure. But they came out, every 6 months for about 5 years. Yeah. And it really makes all the difference in the world, because so what I was going to say is, it seems to me that Bone couldn't have existed if it was just a graphic novel series, right? Like if you came around today and you signed a contract to do Bone, right? You wouldn't be getting a book out every 6 months. You'd be getting a book out every 2 years, right? And the narrative would work in the end, right? But there's something about that. There's something about serialization and the ability to make that work, which I think is fundamental to the success of Bone and your ability to bring your vision onto the market. Yeah. I agree. The fact that we were able to put it out that fast definitely made new readers happen.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, Raina joined graphics. At first with Babysitter's Club, but then when she did her own book, Smile,
it
was a one-off.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that took everything to the next.
Exactly.
Level.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the end. I mean, I remember being at a signing probably with Raina, and she had whatever her second book was, Sisters.
Yep.
And then she had a little promo thing on the edge of the table, and I remember a little boy who probably could have been more than 9 saw that there was a new Raina book coming, and he went ballistic. He was so excited, and I'm like, "This is next level shit, right?"
Yeah,
This is a new thing happening. She's definitely the queen. No question.
Yeah. So now, I mean, let's jump like all the way forward. Now you're wrapping up Tukey. Tukey Saves the World. It's a Kickstarter. You serialized it, some of it, a while ago, but you're going straight to just 2 graphic novels here. Did it change the work to sort of do it all and not have it out there? Like, how is that in relationship to how Bone was for you? I don't know if I formed that question properly.
No, I think I understood that. Well, I wanted to dip my toe into webcomics.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, once I finished Wrestle, my second creator-owned project, and I decided I wanted to jump right into the next thing, and I'm going to do a webcomic. And I was really interested in evolution. I also am really into, like, Conan and Doc Savage and The Shadow and Tarzan. I'm really into pulps and mystical lost worlds. I'm into all that kind of stuff, and I was thinking that's where my next story is going to be. And I was going to base it in a period of evolution that I thought was a really interesting place to tell the story. So I just jumped in. I made up the characters. I kind of had a pretty loose idea. I knew what the ending was going to be. That's always important to me. And I started just throwing up like a page a week. I did it. I don't think it worked. People seem to like it, and people are happy to see it come back. I've gotten that message.
Yeah.
But when it was one thing when I was doing 1 page a week, and in my mind I was like, oh, this is this week's Prince Valiant or Flash Gordon or the Phantom. This is this week's Sunday Funny.
Right.
But then I tried to, after I think like 3 years, I started to try to publish them as comic books.
Yep.
And I had a couple problems. One was because I did them landscape.
Yep.
To fit your computer, I had to print them sort of like a calendar. Right?
Yeah. And those don't work as comics because they fall off the shelf.
Yeah.
Right.
People didn't like that, but that's not the problem I had with it. My problem was putting these Sunday to be continued pages, one page after the other, they didn't flow.
Right.
They didn't come alive in a way that's very important in my comic storytelling. I thought it was very start and stop, and then there's a third element that made me just shut the whole thing down. Well, there's a fourth one, but I'll tell you that after. This was I introduced these little kids into the story, and at that point, the main character, Tukey, was sort of just like a man with no name, sort of like a Clint Eastwood wanderer. And these kids came in and were kind of like, get away from me, kid. Well, that was wrong. I knew that this needed to be a family story, and it had to be a different tone between Tukey and the kids. And I needed to just stop and start from the beginning. So, and then the fourth reason was I couldn't make a penny on a fucking webcomic.
Right? What was the business model? You could never figure it out. It's merchandise is the business model.
I spent 2 years. I was like, come on. I mean, me and Jay, we can figure out the business model. Yeah. We never figured out the business model. Yeah. So one aspect of it I can tell you is you need to really build your community and communicate on a nearly daily basis with the people that are supporting you. And I didn't have that skill set, at least not at that time.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I launched a comics festival in Columbus, CXC, which we're now in our 7th year, I think. And it took up a lot of brain power from Vijay and I and our whole staff for like the first 4 years. Now other people are running that show. And I for the last 3 years, I've spent a bunch of time rethinking Tukey without the pressure of putting it out. Brian, I worked from the comic strip in the Lantern at OSU with Bone.
Yeah.
By the time I did a comic strip, it was about 8 years.
Yeah.
And more than that, if you count the time I was actually working on the comics. So it was probably like 10, 12 years.
Sure.
Lasso was something I started thinking about in like 1999 and didn't come out until 2008.
Right.
So again, we're talking, almost a decade of
gestation.
thought.
Yeah.
Tukey, I'd only thought about it for a year or so when I just jumped into it and thought, well, I only have to do a page a week. I'll just figure it out. Well, now it's been about 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's about the right amount of time, because I have files from every year where I had new ideas, and I'd keep track of things, and I'd add things, and now eventually I'm quite pleased with what I have. I think I took it to San Diego in 2019 and showed pages of it. Then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And lockdown happened. And I just had a lot more time at the board. But I had all this prep work already ready to go. So I started actually working it out and trying to fix it. And I'd gotten feedback from people. And I ended up with enough material for 2 graphic novels. I couldn't believe it. So I was getting ready to self-publish 2 graphic novels of Tukey. I'll show you the cover. I've got the proofs back from the printer.
Oh,
this
nice.
Is the cover of Tukey #1. I'm trying to get it so it's not too shiny.
Yeah.
That's called Tukey Fight for Fire. Oh, this is a proof, so it's got the back cover too.
Yeah.
And then we have a special edition cover on Kickstarter. So this is it. This is again, I can see I'm trying to let you see it so without too much.
No, well, we can see it fine. It's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the 2 books make one image. I don't have the other image yet.
Yeah.
But he's facing off in the night with a stick of fire, because this takes place 2 million years ago. And that was when our species first cultivated fire, could control it, and ate cooked food. That's the moment. And it's also the moment when multiple human species were also alive at the same time. Species that were quite advanced and had, developed fairly sophisticated stone tools, but they rejected fire. Yeah. And I thought, there might be a story there.
Yeah.
What happened to all these players and the stakes involved when some think fire is bad and we thought it was good? So anyway, I ended up with 2 stories. I was going to do 2 graphic novels. I was going to self-publish them in a much more traditional manner when I reconnected, as I mentioned earlier, with the Politos and the Tucci's through their wives. Actually, their wives were doing a podcast with Vijaya, and they were like, "You got to do Kickstarter."
Yeah,
we're like, "Well, Kickstarter, isn't that just for people who are like starting out and need a kickstart?" And they're like, yes and no. I mean, there's this whole community out there that loves to support projects that they love, and they like being part of it. And this brought into that play that you need to communicate and talk to the people who are supporting you. And I learned my lesson from the webcomic. So I began to work pretty hard to talk to the people who were supporting it, and we launched as a Kickstarter. I'm a little nervous how that will then translate into getting into comic book stores.
Sure.
Maybe we could talk about that, because I kind of viewed it. To be honest, Brian, I wasn't getting a lot of encouragement on Tukey.
Yeah.
And I've been around a while.
Yeah.
Who are people going to really want? The old Bone guy's new comic.
Yeah. Well, you're a hell of a cartoonist, so I think the answer is yes. But
you're Brian HIBBS of Comic Experience. There's a lot of people that only want the new Spider-Man books.
Sure.
So in fact, I think a routine thing is to check in with Diamond and say, hey, what do you think you're going to order? And we got some man, they said like 500 books.
Yeah, but Jay was mentioning that to me. Yeah.
I mean, 500 books. I mean, really?
Yeah. No, that's a what?
So to me, Kickstarter suddenly began to look like, okay, this is a marketing tool. This is a way for me to get out there.
Yeah.
And explain what this is.
Yeah.
And let this project earn its way, or prove its worth, I guess is a better way to put it.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, the experience, without going into the whole rigmarole, because it was as complicated as learning how to publish the first time in 1991.
Yep.
But it looks to me like this is a way, just like in 1991, there's a community there.
Yeah.
There's a feels like the beginning of a movement there.
Right.
It's possible. To get around the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Now, I've always gotten around gatekeepers.
Right.
But just because someone wants to get around gatekeepers doesn't mean they don't want to be on comic book store shelves.
Sure.
So how are we going to figure out how? So, okay.
Yeah.
So the Kickstarter was successful. The books are at the printer. They're going to be done in like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But we are going to then put them into the catalogs and try to get them out there. I don't know what the reaction is going to be from retailers. I hope they.
Well, so the fundamental problem with 99% of Kickstarters, right, is that the creators do a production run which is designed to fill the Kickstarter, right? It's not, they don't print an extra 5,000 copies and sell them. They print the 500 copies that they have fans and orders for, and that's it, and it never goes anywhere from there, and so, again, you are in a very privileged place where you already have a publishing infrastructure, a self-publishing infrastructure that already exists, that you doing another book, how to do another book in this market. So we'll see what happens, this thing about Diamond really frustrates me in a way that I cannot express to you, because one of the things that I've been saying to Diamond for literally 20 years is that if they were smart, they would be finding the next Jeff Smith, and they would be like literally bankrolling that, and because it makes all of us better and richer and makes better comics, right? And
my God, they're out there. I mean, Chris Samney with Jonah or whatever it is. Yeah, that book is so amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't wait to see where that goes.
Absolutely. But Diamond should be getting behind this rather than like going, oh, but we have Marvel and DC. We don't have to do any work, right?
Or do they? Do they have Marvel and DC?
Well, no, but this is exactly my point. And they no longer have Marvel and DC. Marvel and DC both told them to fuck off. And now I honestly don't think that Diamond's still going to be in business 5 years from now. Not as we understand Diamond Comics, Well,
I don't know about that, but I do know that I think after this pandemic is over, and you and I can go to comic book shows, like we used to, I think something's going to happen, because that's where everything did kind of happen in my memory.
Sure.
Because I would go to any show, WonderCon, you name it, Ape, San Diego or Chicago, and everybody's there. The people that make comics are there. The people that read comics are there. The people that write about comics are there. The people that sell comics are there. The people that distribute comics are there.
Yeah.
And stuff happened. You got to see like, oh, everybody's excited about Chris Samney's new book.
Right.
And that bubbles through the whole room. Everybody knows that. I think we're going to figure out some new. I think a new thing is kind of happening.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. As I say, I wonder how the structure is going to get there because
well, we still need.
At the end of the day, I don't know that I believe that that the Penguin Random Houses and the Simon & Schusters of the world are interested in supporting comics in the way that you and I are going to support comics, right? In other words, finding that next Jeff Smith and only selling 600 copies of his 4th issue, right? Because that's not how they're thinking about it, right? They're thinking about it as they want to sell this, right? And this is a really, really hard mechanism for young cartoonists, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot to draw with no money.
Yeah. And if Bone had only been a graphic novel, I put it to you that Bone would probably not be successful. It probably would never have finished, probably. Maybe you would have found the presentation.
That was comics. Comics was floppies. It was serialized floppies.
Yeah.
That was the way to do it back then.
Yeah.
And there are still, like I said, this Chris Samney that I keep talking about, man. He's doing that.
Yeah.
You got little Hellboy going. I mean,
yeah.
He's still in.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think something's going to get worked out.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. And we've totally made the change to we're now a children's medium again. Not a children's medium. We're open to children again, and
women.
And women. Yes. No. Absolutely. And it's going to do nothing but make like all this. The other thing that I really say is that all the kids who are like 8 and 9 today, who get to we're sitting in front of the kids rack, all of your books are on it. But if I pointed back to these books, and this is what they're reading, when they're making comics 15 years from now, oh my God, we are going to have such good comics for 15 years from now. It's going to be crazy, I think.
The talent in the new generation right now is off the chart.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking about how crazed I was when I first discovered Dave Sim and Peter Bagg and those bros.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, they're out there right now, and we're talking about serious diversification. And I'm not talking about just sex and gender. I'm talking about genres and content.
Sure.
It's and the talent is so good.
Yeah.
There's really good people coming out.
Again, I'm just worried about how they make money and how they get to the point where they've got 9 books or they've got your 1,500 page.
Come on, Brian. We've been worried about that for 30 years. And
but even more so today, right? Because what I see is a lot of people feeding into like do the work for free, doing the web comics essentially, right? Like that the Korean web comics thing. What's it called? Tapas? Is that right? What? Yeah, the app thing. What's it called? Well, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So, but most of the people doing comics on there are doing it for free, right? And the ones who get the most number of hits, now those guys make a fantastic living, but everybody else is not even working for minimum wage, And I don't know. We've got a square.
There was kind of like a structure of, we knew who the good stores were.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lost track of that. Just because of all the ups and downs of the industry.
Sure.
But there was definitely in the 90s, we knew whether it was Jim Hanley in New York or you and Rory. I mean, everybody knew there's a certain structure of stores, and they went all over Bedrock in Texas.
Yep.
Everybody knew all that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we can name all the Star.
I won't try to name everybody, but maybe that can happen again. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I would love it. I just I'm afraid that the corporations who run 90% of like the direct market part of it, the Marvel and DC thing is still what most stores are, and those corporations hate the direct market. I mean, they literally do. They do not like us. They don't want to do business with us. They're trying to get out of the direct market business as they can,
I know.
without recognizing just how fucking important it is to let books like this exist in the first place. I don't know. I could go on. I'm not going to go on though, because we're talking about you and we're talking about Bone. And
this is what I think about and talk about all the time. So
yeah. Do you feel pressure to do Bone again? Do you know what I mean? Like the critical reaction to Rassel was pretty good, but it really wasn't much of a commercial success, right?
Yeah. No,
was that hard to
Yeah. I mean, of course, that was I was pleased that it got a good critical reception.
Yeah.
And I'm happy with the book. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, of course, it was kind of a letdown. It was my sophomore project, and it was okay. But it was important to me to not redo Bone, and it's still important to me to this day. I mean, I will not do a Bone sequel per se, but even before I finished Bone, I was trying to tell people I can't never not draw them again. I mean, I've been drawing them. They're me from when I was in kindergarten.
You've been drawing them since you're 5.
So I come up with little things like I'm working on a book called Tall Tales 2 for Graphics Scholastic right now, which is it has some Bone stories in it. So it's an excuse. It's not a direct sequel. It's not, but I get to draw the bones. But it's more about me getting to draw the bones than feeding the machine.
Sure.
I did do one. I tried to do some children's books with the bones with Scholastic, and I felt like that was a little bit like trying to feed the machine, and those books flopped completely. So I decided, well, if I'm going to do Bone, it's going to be stuff I want to do, not be trying to feed the machine.
Yeah. The machine is likely to get bigger though, right? Because there's going to be a Netflix animated. Is that still happening?
That's still happening.
That's still happening. It's got to be close-ish?
No. It's a much more complicated process. We're writing. Actually, we're almost done writing.
Okay.
We're just doing the notes on. We've. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to take any of Netflix's thunder. But we've decided, how many episodes it is. We are following the book fairly closely.
Yeah.
We have 2 showrunners that are amazing, and you would know who they were and the shows they came from. They were my first choices. They're doing a great job.
And they've agreed, I'm assuming, to beginning, middle, and end?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this was almost like the decision to go with Scholastic. It's like, oh, they get it. And I've been burned so often by Hollywood, Brian.
Sure.
I have to always say it could still go to shit. But I'm having fun right now, which I cannot say about any of my other experiences with Hollywood. They were all awful, hellish experiences. But this is fun, and it's creative. And I mean, I have a meeting on Friday where we're going to go over those last few episodes. So I'm very excited. Nice.
So it's still in just the writing phase. It hasn't actually started animating at all. Or?
No, well, I mean, we're looking at styles, and we're trying things. We're doing tests, and we just got a line producer. That was like a huge, big step. Somebody who's actually going to start spending money with.
Right. Yeah.
But they this is Netflix. They do the whole thing.
Yeah.
We do the whole. I mean, so you can watch the whole season all at once, and they launch simultaneously around the world, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you don't just go. It's not like, I mean, there's still some kind of a Gantt chart, spreadsheet, to work on these things, but the whole thing's got to be done. So you have to have everything nailed down.
Absolutely.
The whole thing. So it's a lot of prep work. A lot of prep.
Yeah.
But we feel good about the people that are working on it. Sure.
I'm genuinely happy that you were excited by this because I've heard some of the stories, not necessarily from you, but like just how Hollywood will screw you over.
Yeah. When Vijay and I watched Sweet Tooth, the first episode when it came out, and Vijay immediately tweeted to Jeff Lemire and goes, "Are you happy with this? Because man, this is really good. We've read the books." So we know the differences between the book and the show.
Yeah.
And then, which isn't great. But he wrote back that he's very happy. So that made me happy that somebody's having a good time. And of course, Neil's having a very good time with Good Omens and the Sandman. So
yeah. We talked about that a month ago.
Neil's been waiting as long as I have for a show.
Yeah. It's weird. It's weird how it took so long, and I don't know. It couldn't happen to better people, though. That's all I can say. I love you, comics people. I love you all, and you have. I'm so happy that you guys have the success that you do. I really, genuinely
do.
You
were a big part of it. You were a big part of it.
Well, I mean, I do what I can. It's because I love the work, right? The work is the thing that matters, you know. And
well, and you know, in my experience, every comics retailer I know, and I've known a lot.
Yep.
And I've known you from that very first group I ever met. All comics retailers, without exception, that I've ever met, love comics, and they love finding comics for their customers.
Yep.
So that's why I think, even though we're in some kind of state of flux and there's new things happening, like the distribution system is going through some kind of evolution. Yeah. Kickstarter is a new thing, or Indiegogo, or not necessarily just Kickstarter, or just shows coming back together.
Sure.
I think my belief that creators and the talent I see, and that comics retailers want to get comics. We're going to figure this out.
Yeah. Kickstarter and crowdfunding worries me because I'm afraid that it's going to suck all of the energy from the most dedicated fans. You know,
I'm worried about that too. Like I'm not worried
that's a good kind of a worry. That's not a I actually think that Chucky is going to be a book that's not going to fall into that category. You know, at least that's my hope. And I'm really glad that you guys had a retailer tier and you made that happen too. So. 500 copies. I cannot believe that Diamond said 500 copies. That I am staggered by that. I cannot.
I don't know. I don't know what their world is like, what they're going through anymore. But
well, I don't think
that wasn't enough. That wasn't enough for us to think, well, let's do that.
Yeah. Well, and if it's not enough,
hopefully that like I said, Kickstarter let us. It's a proving ground.
Yeah.
There's clearly, I mean, it's not scholastic numbers by a long shot.
Well, you crushed. Oh, you crushed. You absolutely crushed.
Yeah. We sold about 6,000 books in a short period of time.
That's an awful lot of fulfillment that you now have to do.
But I have a really, really good team that's been with me for over 25 years.
Well, but they're probably not used to like, oh my God, we're gonna have to do all of this in like 3 weeks. Oh my God.
Oh well, no, I'm not saying we're not all shit in our pants. But because we got into it and it blew up so fast.
Yeah.
That we had talked about some stretch goals, but we thought we had a week or at least a week to like kind of get our act together. And man, no, it just, we blew past like all our first.
Yeah.
And then we were like making it like, we got to do closing day pins.
Yeah.
We haven't done closing day pins since the 90s, right? Yeah. So we're like, all of a sudden we're making keychains. Oh, I made a cool keychain. I got my keys on it. Look at this, man. So this is this guy, we found this guy who makes perfectly accurate Homo erectus skull keychains.
That's cool.
And then we found another company that would make like a little Tukey cover.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's those are that we've got those. Those are all going to go out with the first books. Keys to my studio and bike are not included. So it's fun. It's fun, and I'm really hopeful that it won't. This is what I'm worried about. Not you or retailers that I've known for a long time or who know my stuff, but people are going to be like, well, you just sucked all that, like you said, all the energy out. You just sucked all the sales out of it. Nobody's going to buy it. I worry about that. And that's something that we're going to have to talk about going forward and seeing how it works, not just for me, but for other people.
Well, this is the thing where now that Diamond no longer has Marvel and DC, I think it gives you potentially a piece of leverage to take some leadership and to go to Diamond. Look, let's make this book big. We've shown on Kickstarter can be big. We need your help to be able to get the word out, because it's where Diamond has to pivot, right? Diamond has to pivot to actually selling books, right? They spent 25 years not having to use that muscle. They don't know how to use that muscle anymore. I'm editorializing.
They were actually super supportive of me and the other self-publishers back in the 90s. They were really cool about it.
Yeah.
Capital was really good too.
Yeah.
Remember Wayne Markley?
I do.
I love that.
But there was always the difference between Capital and Diamond. You know, Diamond's catalog, Capital's catalog was always, here's a book that we believe in. We like this book. We think you should read this book. And Diamond's catalog was like, well, here's who's paying us money for ads. You know, I'm just saying.
Well, we're getting a little inside baseball. Sorry, Keith.
No, I know. I
think this whole interview has been inside baseball. But
do you have a big project in your mind that's germinating that maybe we won't see for 5 or 7 more years?
I do have a little one that's starting.
Okay.
When I thought Tukey was, I was going to have to just abandon it at one point because I just wasn't really getting any encouragement. Yeah. I did come up with about 3 ideas, and then suddenly the 3 of them became one idea together. And I it's just floating around back there. But I would like to do, this was 2 books of Tukey. I would like that to be 6 books. I want to do 4 more.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To get to the ending of the story.
Are you
like it's not the web comic. I saved most of the artwork, and I kept some of the main points of the story that happened in there, but it's a different story. It has a very different tone. It's not quite real. It's based in real paleoanthropology, but it's not. It's more Miyazaki.
Okay.
Than real archaeology or something.
What's your level of production these days? I mean, is it a page a week, or are you doing better than that, or?
It's always just depended.
Sure.
I pretty much penciled and inked 90% of the 2 books in pretty much during the COVID when I was just trapped at my desk. But I'd had a couple of years to really figure out what I was doing. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I still have about 50 pages of the second one to ink, but it's all written, it's all penciled, it's all lettered. I just have to ink it. So I'll let you know how quickly I'm inking those pages.
But it sounds like you were pretty much getting a page a day done overall.
Probably averaged out. I never did a page and then start to finish. But probably averaged out. I got very close to 250 pages between the 2 books.
Yeah.
Of comics.
Yeah.
So
that's 300 and about 400 days. So a page every other day. Yeah.
I would say a page every other day is about right.
Yeah, that's great.
Once I had the story figured out, I could.
Yeah. You don't work digitally, I'm assuming. You're still pen and paper at a desk.
Yeah, although a weird thing has happened over the years where, starting with learning Photoshop to do the color for Scholastic, a lot of my work with Shazam and Rassel, and with Tukey, I do the page as what I think it's going to be. And I get it done, lettered, inked, everything. But then when I see it all together, that editing skill that I have, that it's not me doing it, and I can read it and I can go, oh, that's not good.
Right.
I change things, but then I change them digitally.
Okay.
So even though there are original pages, quite a few of them
are not what the final version is.
They're not the final version. I mean, some of them are, but interesting. I see the word balloons a lot. Sometimes I'll move 3 panels off of this page and fill that up with new artwork and move those 3 panels somewhere else.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you still work with paper and pen because that's how you do it, or do you like the feedback, I guess?
I like the feedback from my brush.
Yeah.
So I happen to have a page here. This is a page from the new Tukey comic.
Nice.
This is you can see their camp out. You can see the adults are all talking.
Yep.
You can see their shadows, and that's kids.
Yep.
But that's all pen and ink, and these are all balloons that I have
hand lettered. Yeah. Well,
hand lettered, except I made a font.
Oh, okay. All right.
And then so they're pasted on there.
Yeah.
Okay. So and you get a size of how big it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that. I can tell you on this page, I changed these balloons in different. The final ones are not those balloons.
Okay.
but I like the feel of pushing the black ink around on the paper.
Yeah.
Of taking my brush. I told you I brought props. I waited for 2 hours to bring them out. So I have some brushes. This is my main brush right here. So this is my pen dot, my pencil case.
Yeah.
I have a number 1 brush. Sable hair comes from the tail of sables.
Right.
And I can get thicks and thins. Every line on that page came from this brush, whether it was the thicks around here or the real gentle, texture. That's all the same brush. And I love that. At that point, I've gone over the story so many times. I don't have to I can just zone out a little bit and I can make, I can do the hatching.
Yeah.
I do have one interesting brush here. This was a brush that was once owned by Milton Caniff.
Wow.
He donated all his artwork and papers to the Ohio State University. Now it's called the Billy Ireland Cartoon Museum and Library.
Yeah. Which
I discovered very early on in 1982, when it was just 2 rooms in the journalism building. And they had all this material they had to go through and catalog. And they had boxes and boxes of these. Milton Caniff kept all his brushes in big rubber bands and wrapped in plastic. And they had, I don't know how many they had, but they had a ton of them. And one of the guys that worked there that I knew pretty well, he goes, "We got so many of these. Do you want these?" And he gave me a stack of these Milton Caniff brushes. They look how cruddy these are.
Yeah. I could see.
And they are like you dip them in ink and they're just like a box of broom. But man, I fill in to this day all the big dark areas in Bone, in Rassel, and in Tukey are all been filled in
by Caniffs
with Perry and the Pirates Juju.
I love it. That's fucking fantastic, dude. Oh, that's great. I got
one more example that I brought along. This is I showed you this cover earlier. It's the special edition cover of Tukey.
Yeah.
Well, this is the original art of that. I got all my drinks and coffee here. I don't want to spill. So here's that's the original art. You can see how big it is, but it also has a little ink wash on it.
Yeah.
And the other half of that is okay. So there's that one, and then this is the other. This is book 2 special edition.
Oh, nice, super nice. I love it.
So that's
great. Beautiful. Fuck yeah, man. That's that dude. I am so happy that you are working and this work's coming out, because you'd kind of disappeared, for quite some time.
I spent like 5 years really dedicated full time to this festival.
Yeah. But
I needed that time to think.
Yeah.
About Tukey. So I'm happy to be doing it again for sure.
Yeah. I can't wait. I can't wait. It's funny because normally my last question would be plug something coming up, but that was what we just did for the last 15 minutes. So
good man. Good job.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to say to the assembled people of the world?
No, I mean, if you're one of the people that was on the Kickstarter, my gratitude is quite sincere. We had this amazing experience, Brian, where I mentioned how you must engage with the audience, and we all 4 of us did. Me, Vijaya, Kathleen Glowson, and Tom Gott. We were all talking to people all day, like from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. We were all talking to people, and this amazing thing happened. Everybody was so happy. Everybody was just so freaking happy. It was comics. They wanted to. A lot of people read Bone back in the '90s, like our age. A lot of people read it when they were young, and just the enthusiasm was truly cool. I started to remember why I love comics even more again.
I love that.
It makes me just want to go even more back to the shows where where you can meet the readers again. Yeah.
No, I love that, and that'll be next year. That's what we're gonna do next year. Once everybody gets vaccinated. Get vaccinated if you're not vaccinated, people. All right, let's end it. Let's end it here, particularly because you have the business background as well as being a self-publisher. The thing that we always ask, there's a lot of cartoonists, wannabe cartoonists who watch these shows. What's the piece of advice that you would give someone coming up, a cartoonist, a new creator? How would you generally advise them? Whether it's something businessy, whether it's something philosophical, whether it's something crafty. I don't know. It's totally on up to you for how you want to answer that.
Well, if you've sat through this whole thing, you heard me explain my experience. I'm not sure that the situation is the same. The institutions are not the same. But I hope what you heard was me and Vijaya. We both we worked really hard to figure out the system and ride it out. So you do have to figure that out. And I have nothing really insightful for the people who are starting brand new, other than you are resilient. And if you want to do this, you'll figure it out. But if I was going to really give advice, it would really be more about the creative side, the artist side.
Yeah.
And that's do what you want to do. Don't do it for the audience. Don't try to figure out what would sell. Do what you want to do and do it as well as you can. Draw it as well as you can. And I can tell you, I wasted a lot of years waiting for other people to give me permission to start doing a comic. And I never got it.
Yeah.
So don't wait for anybody's permission. Just figure it out and do it.
Yes. I agree with every word of that. That is fantastic. Jeff, we're at 2.5 hours, believe it or not.
That's incredible. If anybody's still out there.
Yeah. I feel like we've been only talking for 45 minutes. I mean, this is just such I love talking to you, and I can't wait to see you and Vijaya again next time we get in the same city. I'm really excited for this. Bone is awesome. Tukey is going to be awesome. We know that. And just thank you for your time and your generosity here. I have a little housekeeping on my end, not housekeeping, but on Sunday, it's the Kids Club. And we've got No One Returns from the Enchanted Forest by Robin Robinson, which is a great deal of fun. This is a great book. So Robin's going to be here then. Next month's Classic Club is going to be Lock and Key. So we've got Joe Hill, Gabriel Rodriguez, and Chris Rael, the editor, is also going to be here to talk about this. And then our adult graphic novel of the month club next month is Alison Bechdel and The Secret of Superhuman Strength. So now you know what the next couple shows are, so you're going to want to tune into all of those as well, I think. Because I love talking about comics with people who love comics. And I've loved talking with my friend, longtime friend, Jeff Smith.
Good to see you, man.
I'm so happy. I'm just so happy for you, man. I'm so happy.
I can see that. Okay, so I've been waiting all night for this.
Okay.
I brought a rum back from Key West. This is really
nice.
delicious. It's called Pilar, named after Hemingway's boat. It's delicious. I've been waiting all night. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers to you. I'm drinking water, but yes, cheers to you, my friend. Awesome. Well, that's it for the graphic novel of the month club for this episode. Thank you, Jeff Smith. Thank you, Jordan, for running the show. Thank you, Zoe and Kat and all the rest of my staff for keeping me alive. Thank you for The Beat for being a sponsor. Thank you for the members for making sure that this is possible. And most of all, thank you, Jeff Smith, and all of the creators like you who allow us to have this graphic novel of the month club. So thank you. We'll see you next month. Good night.